The moment Ilaria Mancini heard the lock click from the outside, she understood everything. She stood in the bridal suite of the Castellano estate, 22 minutes before she was supposed to walk down the aisle, and the door had just been locked. Not from her side. From theirs. Through the carved oak, she could hear them. Gio Castellano, the man she was about to marry, and his father, Renato, the man who had arranged every detail of this day like a general planning a siege. "She's not going anywhere." Renato's voice. Low, certain, the way men spoke when they'd already decided how the world would work. "The bishop is already at the altar. This happens today. And if she tries to back out again?" Gio asked. Again. That word hit Ilaria like ice water. She had tried to back out once, 3 weeks ago, privately, carefully, explaining that she wasn't ready, that this felt wrong. He'd smiled, kissed her forehead, and said they'd talk about it later. They never did. And now she knew why. "She doesn't get to back out," Renato said. "Her father owes us 2.3 million. The wedding clears the debt. If she walks, her family loses the restaurant, the house, everything. She's not stupid, just sentimental." Gio laughed. A short, empty sound. "And after the wedding?" "After the wedding, she's a Castellano. She'll learn what that means soon enough. They all do." Ilaria pressed her back against the wall, her cathedral-length veil pooling around her feet like spilled milk. Her hands weren't shaking. That surprised her. She thought they should be shaking. "Before you hear what happened next, do me a favor. Drop a comment with the city you're watching from. I want to see how far this story reaches, and if you stay until the end, you'll understand why this one day split Ilaria's life into before and after." Hit that like button and let's begin. She stood in that locked room for a full minute, breathing, listening to their footsteps fade. Then she turned and looked at herself in the full-length mirror. White silk, hand-sewn beading, a dress that cost more than her father made in a year. A dress chosen for her, fitted on her, paid for by the Castellanos. A uniform, she realized. Not a gown. A uniform for the role she was about to play for the rest of her life. Ilaria walked to the window. Second floor. Below, a service courtyard, a catering van with its back doors open. Beyond that, a tree line, and beyond that, the road. She didn't think about it. Thinking would have stopped her. She pulled off her heels, unclipped the veil, and opened the window. The Castellano family didn't build their empire. They inherited it, expanded it, and defended it with the kind of quiet violence that never made the news, but everyone in the city of Ravara understood. Renato Castellano owned construction. Not a construction company. Construction. Every major development project in the eastern provinces had Castellano concrete in its bones, Castellano steel in its spine. Politicians attended his birthday dinners. Judges played golf at his private club. Police chiefs sent Christmas cards. Gio was his only son. Handsome enough to photograph well, charming enough to close deals, and hollow enough to never question the machine he'd been born into. He didn't love Ilaria. He didn't hate her either. She was a term in a contract, a signature on a merger between his family's power and her father's debt. Ilaria's father, Tommaso Mancini, had made one mistake. One bad investment, one trusted partner who vanished with the capital, and suddenly, 3 generations of a family restaurant business were drowning. Renato Castellano had appeared like an answer to prayer. He'd cover everything, all debts cleared, the restaurant saved, the family home protected. The price was Ilaria. Not stated that bluntly, of course. It was framed as an introduction, then courtship, then an engagement that moved so fast Ilaria barely had time to breathe between the first dinner and the fitted wedding dress. Her father couldn't meet her eyes anymore. Her mother prayed constantly, Rosary beads clicking in the kitchen while she cooked meals no one had the appetite to eat. Ilaria had spent the past half-year learning what it meant to enter the Castellano orbit. The control was subtle at first. Suggestions about what she should wear, opinions about her friends. A new phone, gifted by Gio, that she later discovered tracked her location. The slow, careful erasure of everything that made her herself. She didn't have a year. She barely had 20 minutes. And those 20 minutes were disappearing fast. The drop from the second-floor window was farther than she'd calculated. Ilaria landed hard on the gravel, barefoot, the impact jolting up through her ankles. Pain flared, then dulled. She didn't stop. She gathered the silk in both fists and ran. Past the catering van, past a startled dishwasher smoking by the service entrance, past the sculpted hedgerows that bordered the estate. The dress tore on a branch. She kept moving. Gravel turned to dirt, dirt to grass, and grass to the cracked asphalt of a service road that ran parallel to the estate's northern wall. She had no phone, no money, no shoes, no plan beyond a single directive: don't stop. She followed the service road for maybe 10 minutes before it connected to a 2-lane highway. She could hear the estate behind her now, distant voices, a car engine starting. They'd found the open window. A black sedan was parked on the shoulder, maybe 200 meters ahead. Engine idling, tinted windows. Every instinct told her to avoid it. Strange car, empty highway, a woman alone in a torn wedding dress. This was how cautionary tales began. But the alternative was the road behind her, and what was coming down it. She was 30 meters from the sedan when the rear door opened. A man stepped out, tall, mid-30s, wearing a dark suit that looked like it had been tailored by someone who understood the geometry of intimidation. Dark hair, sharp features, and eyes that assessed her the way a chess player assessed a board. He looked at her bare feet, the torn dress, and the blood on her ankles. Then he looked past her, down the road toward the estate. "Castellano wedding," he said. It wasn't a question. Ilaria stopped, chest heaving. How did he know? The church bells started 20 minutes ago. They stopped 5 minutes ago. And you're running from that direction in a wedding dress. I'm guessing the ceremony didn't go as planned. Who are you? Someone who has a complicated relationship with the Castellano family? He seemed to read the calculation on her face. If I worked for Renato, I wouldn't be standing here having a conversation with you. I'd have already put you in the car. My name is Dante Serafico, he said, and you have about 4 minutes before whoever's looking for you reaches this road. You can keep running barefoot with no phone and no money, or you can get in the car. I'm heading north. Away from here. Why would you help me? I'm not helping you. I'm driving north. You'd just be in the car while I do it. That's not an answer. No, he agreed. But it's the best one you're going to get in the next 3.5 minutes. Behind her, she heard it, the low growl of a heavy engine accelerating on the service road. She got in the car. Dante slid in after her and said one word to the driver. Go. The sedan pulled onto the highway without urgency. Just smooth, steady speed northward. In the side mirror, Ilaria watched the Castellano SUV reach the highway junction and stop. It sat there for a long moment, idling. Then it turned south. They went the wrong way, Ilaria whispered. They went the way they expected you to go. People running from something usually run toward what they know. You went north. That's unexpected. She didn't believe in coincidence, but she was barefoot and bleeding in a stranger's car, and for the first time in months, she could breathe without feeling a hand around her throat. Dante reached into the console and pulled out a phone. Prepaid, still in its packaging. You should call someone. Let them know you're alive. Someone who won't immediately tell the Castellanos where you are. My father would tell them. My mother would panic, and then my father would tell them. I have a friend. Noor. She wouldn't talk. Ilaria stared at the phone. 40 minutes ago, she'd been standing in a locked bridal suite being traded like currency. Now she was in a stranger's car heading north with nothing but a ruined dress and a prepaid phone. You said you have a complicated relationship with the Castellanos. What does that mean? It means Renato Castellano destroyed my family's business 15 years ago, took everything we had. My father died owing him money he could never repay. He paused. Sound familiar? Ilaria's breath caught. Yes. So when I say I'm not helping you, I mean it. I don't do charity and I don't rescue strangers. But anything that inconveniences Renato Castellano on what's supposed to be his perfect day is something I'm willing to facilitate. So I'm a weapon. You're a woman who got in my car. What you are beyond that is your business. But if the Castellanos want you back, and they will, you're going to need more than a head start. You're going to need a plan. I don't have a plan. Then we should probably make one. The sedan moved north, the estate shrinking behind them. Ilaria leaned back against the leather seat, her torn dress spreading around her like shed skin. She didn't have a plan. She didn't have money or shoes or any idea what came next. But she had something she hadn't had 20 minutes ago. A choice. And she'd already made it. Dante's safe house was a third-floor apartment above a closed bookshop in Calais, a mid-sized city 3 hours north of Ravara. The kind of place people passed through without remembering. The apartment was clean, sparse, and functional. A kitchen with actual food. A living room with 2 couches and a wall of books that looked red. A bathroom with a lock that worked from the inside. That detail mattered more than she could explain. Dante handed her a towel, a first aid kit, and a pair of women's shoes. Size 38. They were my sister's. She lives in Lisbon now. Left a few things behind. Ilaria sat on the bathroom floor and cleaned the cuts on her feet, watching the blood swirl pink in the basin water. She looked at herself in the mirror. Mascara smudged. Hair half collapsed. The wedding dress ruined beyond repair. This was what freedom looked like. Messy and bleeding and completely without a plan. But the face in the mirror wasn't broken. The face in the mirror was awake. During the engagement, she'd watched herself slowly disappear. Not physically, but something behind the eyes dimming week by week. The Ilaria who talked back, who argued, who stayed up until 3 in the morning debating philosophy with her university friends, that Ilaria had been packed away like off-season clothing. Replaced by a quieter version who smiled when expected and agreed when required. She hadn't always been quiet. Before her father's debt, before the Castellanos, Ilaria Mancini had been someone. She'd been 2 semesters away from finishing a law degree at the University of Serrano. Not just attending, excelling, top of her class in constitutional law. The only student Professor Cassagne had ever invited to co-author a published paper. She'd been building a thesis on coercive financial arrangements in family law, how debts were used to trap people in relationships they couldn't leave, how economic pressure functioned as a form of domestic control. The irony wasn't lost on her. She'd dropped out when Renato Castellanos' offer appeared, and it became clear that Ilaria's compliance was the currency being traded. She'd told Professor Cassagne she needed a leave of absence. The professor had looked at her with knowing eyes and said the door was always open. That was 14 months ago. The door might still be open. But Ilaria wasn't the same person who'd walked through it. She peeled off the wedding dress and left it in a heap on the bathroom floor. Dante had left clothes outside the door. Simple things. His sister's. They fit well enough. When she came out, Dante was at the kitchen table with 2 cups of coffee and a laptop. "We need to talk about what happens next," he said. "The Castellanos will look for you. Renato doesn't lose investments. And right now that's what you are to him. An investment that walked off the balance sheet. I know how he operates. I spent half a year inside that family. I know the lawyers, the contacts, and the people he owns. I'm not going to spy for you. If that's what this is, I should leave now. That's not what this is. But knowing the shape of the threat helps you survive it. She wrapped her hands around the coffee cup. What do you actually do, Dante? You have a safe house, a driver, a prepaid phone ready to go. Who are you? I run a logistics company. Legal mostly. Shipping, warehousing, distribution. My father started it. Renato crushed it when my father refused to let Castellano Freight use our routes for shipments that wouldn't survive customs inspection. After my father died, I rebuilt it. Different routes, different partners, different rules. Different how? I don't work with people who use debt as a leash. He met her eyes. And I don't do business with anyone who treats people as collateral. The words landed somewhere deep in her chest. Not because they were romantic, because they were specific. Because they described exactly what had been done to her without flinching from it. She took the prepaid phone and called Noor Hadia. Tell me you're safe, Noor said. No greeting, no small talk. I'm safe. I'm in Kalen. The whole city is talking. Renato told everyone you had a breakdown, that you're mentally unstable, that he's looking for you out of concern for your welfare. Your mother is on the news crying. Of course. That was the play. Not anger, not pursuit. Concern. The caring father-in-law searching for his fragile bride. It made her the problem. I'm not unstable, Noor. I know that. But they're building a narrative, and right now they're the only ones talking. Then maybe it's time someone else started talking, Ilaria said. Ilaria spent the first week in Kalen learning how to exist without permission. For the entire engagement, every decision had been filtered through the Castellanos. What she wore, where she went, who she spoke to. It had been a rehearsal for ownership, training her to defer, to check, and to wait for approval before acting. The first morning, she stood in the kitchen for 10 minutes trying to decide what to make for breakfast. Not because she didn't know how to cook. She'd grown up in a restaurant kitchen, but because she kept waiting for someone to tell her what was appropriate. She made eggs, scrambled, the way her mother made them, with too much butter and fresh herbs. She ate them standing at the counter, looking out the window at a city that didn't know her name. It was the best meal she'd had in longer than she could remember. Dante gave her space. He came and went on his own schedule, always telling her when he'd be back, never asking her to account for her time. He left money on the counter without ceremony. When she tried to refuse it, he said, "You'll pay me back when you can. Or don't. Either way, you need to eat." She started walking, first around the block, expecting a Castellano car on every corner, then farther, through the old quarter with its narrow streets, along the riverwalk where university students argued about things that mattered, past the courthouse where lawyers carried files thick enough to change lives. She found a library on her fourth day. She sat there for 3 hours reading case law she'd missed. Her mind felt like a muscle coming back after an injury. Stiff at first, then warming, then remembering what it was built to do. On the 6th day, she said no. Dante suggested she stay inside for the weekend. Castellano associates had been seen in the northern cities, asking questions, showing photos. No, Ilaria said. I'll be careful, but I'm not hiding indoors. I spent the last half year doing that. I'm done. He looked at her for a long moment. Then he nodded. Take the back streets. Keep the phone on you. It was the first time someone had respected her no without arguing, without guilt, without the slow pressure to reconsider. She started standing differently, straighter. The hunch she'd developed, the one that made her smaller and less noticeable, began to dissolve. She made eye contact with strangers, asked questions without apologizing for taking up space. On the 9th day, she called Professor Kassane. Ilaria, I've been waiting for this call. Your thesis topic is still registered. Your credits are still valid. And your chair in my seminar is still empty. When are you coming back? I don't know if I can. My situation is complicated. It always is. Come when you're ready. We'll figure out the rest. Ilaria hung up and sat on a bench by the river. Something had shifted. Not dramatically. Slowly, like a bone resetting. She was remembering the shape of her own spine. On the 12th day, Ilaria told Dante she needed to go back to Rivara. He looked at her like she'd suggested swimming across the ocean. That's the worst idea you've had since getting into a stranger's car. I need something from my mother's house, something I left behind. They argued for an hour. Dante's position was logical, practical, and correct. The Castellanos were watching her mother's house. But Ilaria wasn't asking for permission. She was informing him of her decision. He recognized the difference eventually. I'll drive you myself, in and out. No more than 20 minutes. They left before dawn. 3 hours south, the highway empty, the sky turning from black to gray to gold. They parked 2 streets from her mother's house. Dante stayed in the car, engine running. The back door was unlocked. Her mother always left it unlocked. Ilaria slipped inside. The kitchen smelled the same. Garlic, olive oil, the faint sweetness of bread dough rising under a cloth. Her mother was asleep upstairs. She could hear the soft rhythm of her breathing through the thin floor. She didn't go upstairs, couldn't risk waking her. Instead, she went to the pantry. Behind the flour bins on the top shelf, there was a wooden box. Her grandmother's box. Nonna Caterina's box. Inside was a leather document folder, cracked with age, held together with a ribbon that had once been red and was now the color of dried roses. Inside were handwritten pages. Dense, careful script in fading ink. Her grandmother's case notes. Nonna Caterina had been a legal advocate in the years before women were easily admitted to the bar. She'd never held a formal license, never argued in a courtroom. But she'd spent 30 years helping women in Rivara navigate divorces, custody disputes, property claims, and financial abuse. Writing briefs that real lawyers filed under their own names, building cases that set precedents she never received credit for. Ilaria had found the box when she was 16, had read every page, every argument her grandmother had constructed with nothing but intelligence and stubbornness. It was the reason she'd gone to law school, the reason she'd chosen coercive financial arrangements as her thesis topic, the reason she'd believed the law could protect people like her. She held the folder against her chest. This was what she'd come back for. The proof that someone in her family had fought the same fight and hadn't backed down. The proof that resistance was inherited. She was about to leave when she saw it. On the kitchen table, her mother's handwriting on a torn piece of envelope. A note. Unfinished. Never sent. My Ilaria. I know what I've asked you to do. I know the price. Every night I pray you'll forgive me, but more than that, I pray you'll find a way out that I wasn't brave enough to find for you. You were always the strongest of us. Stronger than your father. Stronger than me. Don't let them make you forget that. Ilaria read it twice, folded it carefully, put it inside the leather folder with her grandmother's papers. Then she left through the back door without looking back. Did you get what you needed? Dante asked. Yes. He looked at the folder but didn't ask what was inside. Just put the car in gear and drove north. Back in Calais, she cleared the kitchen table and spread her grandmother's papers across it. Case by case, page by page, 30 years of a woman's invisible legal career. The arguments were sharp, precise, ahead of their time. Some dealt with exactly what Ilaria was living through. Financial coercion dressed up as generosity. Dante came in around midnight, found her surrounded by yellowed papers, and set a cup of tea beside her without interrupting. My grandmother built cases for 30 years that other lawyers took credit for. She never got a single acknowledgement. I'm going to finish what she started. Not from a kitchen table, from a courtroom. And the first case I'm going to build is my own. "What do you need?" he asked. "Time, access to a law library, and a way to contact Professor Kassan without it being traced. I can do all three." She gathered the papers and tied the faded ribbon carefully, the way Nonna Katerina must have tied it decades ago. This folder was going to be her armor. 30 years of a woman's fight, carried forward by her granddaughter who refused to let the same system win twice. 6 weeks later, Ilaria walked into the Rivara Provincial Courthouse. She'd planned this the way a lawyer plans an opening argument. Every detail considered, every contingency mapped, every weakness identified before the other side could exploit it. She wore a dark navy suit she'd bought with money she'd earned. 3 weeks of freelance legal research for a small firm in Cologne, grinding work that paid by the page. The suit wasn't expensive. It didn't need to be. It was hers, and she'd paid for it herself. Professor Kassain had made quiet calls. A hearing had been scheduled. Civil, not criminal. A petition to review whether the financial arrangement between Tommaso Mancini and Renato Castellano constituted coercive control under the province's family protection statutes. Ilaria had written the petition herself. 46 pages. Every argument built on her grandmother's framework, updated with current case law, supported by evidence she'd gathered during her time inside the Castellano household. Contracts she'd photographed when no one was watching. Conversations she'd documented in a notebook hidden in her suitcase lining. Financial records she'd glimpsed on Renato's desk and reconstructed from memory. Dante had driven her that morning. He'd offered to come inside. She'd said no. "This is mine. I need to walk in there alone." He'd nodded. "I'll be in the cafe across the street. Take as long as you need." The courthouse lobby was marble and fluorescent light, the architecture of institutional power designed to make individuals feel small. She checked the board. Courtroom 7. Judge Morvain presiding. Ilaria knew the name. Old guard, meticulous, not easily pressured. She'd take the case seriously. That was all Ilaria needed. The hallway outside was empty except for a woman on the wooden bench. Mid-50s, silver hair, reading glasses perched on her nose, reviewing documents from a leather briefcase. "Ilaria Mancini," the woman said. "Not a question. I'm Riva Selene. I'll be representing the Castellano family's interests today." Ilaria had researched her. Senior partner at Marchetti and Selene. Known for precision, patience, and never losing cases she intended to win. "I should tell you," Selene said, "that my clients consider this petition frivolous and expect it to be dismissed." "Then they shouldn't mind having it reviewed by a judge," Ilaria said. Selene studied her. Something moved behind her professional mask. Recognition. The way one chess player recognizes another across a board. "You wrote the petition yourself. It's well constructed." "For a student, I'll take that as a compliment." "Take it however you like. It won't change the outcome." They entered the courtroom. Ilaria took her seat at the petitioner's table, her grandmother's leather folder beside her legal pad. She didn't need the old documents for the hearing, but having them there steadied something inside her. A reminder that she wasn't the first woman in her family to sit across from power and refuse to look away. The gallery was nearly empty. A court reporter, a clerk, and in the back row, someone she recognized, Gio Castellano. He was sitting with his arms crossed, his face arranged in bored inconvenience. He didn't look angry. He didn't look hurt. He looked at Ilaria the way someone looks at furniture put in the wrong room. Their eyes met. Ilaria held his gaze until he looked away first. It took 11 seconds. She counted. Judge Morvain was exactly what Ilaria expected. Sharp, unhurried, unimpressed by everything except evidence. She read the petition in silence. Then she removed her glasses and looked at Ilaria. "Miss Mancini, you're alleging that the conditions attached to the debt forgiveness, specifically your marriage to Mr. Castellano's son, amount to transactional duress. Is that accurate?" "Yes, Your Honor." The debt forgiveness was explicitly contingent on my compliance with a marriage arrangement I did not freely consent to. When I attempted to withdraw 3 weeks before the ceremony, I was told my family would lose everything. The door to the bridal suite was locked from the outside on the day of the wedding. Gio shifted in his seat. Solene stood. Your Honor, the financial arrangement and the engagement were separate personal matters. Conflating the two is misleading. Then why, Ilaria said, standing without waiting to be recognized, is the debt forgiveness clause in the same document as the marriage agreement? Page 14, paragraph 9. The discharge of all outstanding obligations is contingent upon the completion of the union between the parties' respective families, to be formalized through the marriage of Ilaria Mancini and Giovanni Castellano. She placed a copy on the judge's bench. She'd photographed it 7 months ago in Renato's study while supposedly looking for a bathroom. Solene's pause was a fraction too long. Your Honor, the language refers to a broader family relationship, not specifically to the marriage as a binding condition. With respect, Ilaria said, the phrase formalized through the marriage is specific. It's conditional. And it transforms what my father believed was a business arrangement into a contract that traded his daughter's autonomy for financial relief. Judge Morvain looked at the document. Counselor, were you aware of this clause? Solene hesitated. I became aware of it recently. How recently? Solene didn't answer immediately, and in that silence, Ilaria understood. Solene hadn't known. She'd been kept in the dark, and the realization was hitting her in real time. Your Honor, Ilaria continued, I'm asking the court to review whether this arrangement meets the legal threshold for coercive control under the Family Protection Act of 2019. If it does, the debt should be declared void. My father is a restaurant owner who made one bad investment. He shouldn't have to sell his daughter to pay for a business mistake, and I shouldn't have to choose between my family's survival and my own freedom. The courtroom was silent. Gio stood up. This is ridiculous. She agreed to marry me. She said yes. She wore the dress. Nobody forced her. Judge Morvain turned to him with controlled authority. Mr. Castellano, you are not a party to this proceeding. Sit down or leave. She was happy. His voice cracked on the word, and Ilaria realized with a shock that he believed it. He'd mistaken her compliance for contentment, her silence for satisfaction, her survival instincts for love. I was never happy, Ilaria said quietly. Not once. I was trapped, and I was terrified. And I smiled because smiling was safer than telling you the truth. Something human flickered across his face. Confusion. Pain. The beginning of a question he'd never thought to ask. Then it was gone, replaced by the Castellano mask. He sat down without another word. Judge Morvain adjourned the hearing and scheduled a full review. Miss Mancini, you'll need formal legal representation for the next stage. In the hallway, Solene caught up to her. That clause. I genuinely didn't know. When I agreed to represent the Castellanos, I was told this was a standard debt dispute. I was not told about conditional marriage language. Does it change anything? It changes what I'm willing to represent. She looked at Ilaria. You need a real lawyer. Federica Tahan. She specializes in coercive control cases. She's expensive, but she's the best. I can't afford expensive. Solene pulled out a business card and wrote a number on the back. Tell Federica I sent you. Tell her this one matters. And tell her I'll testify about what my clients failed to disclose to their own counsel if it comes to that. Why are you doing this? Because I've been a lawyer for 28 years, and I've never once been ashamed of my clients until today. Solene walked away, heels clicking on marble. A crack in the Castellano machine, opened not by force, but by the weight of what they'd put in writing. Ilaria found Dante in the cafe across the street. How did it go? The judge scheduled a full review. The Castellano lawyer didn't know about the marriage clause. She might testify against her own clients. And I need a real lawyer. That's a lot for one morning. Ilaria set her grandmother's folder on the table and smiled. The first real smile she'd felt in months. I think my grandmother would have enjoyed today, she said. The full review was scheduled for 6 weeks later. In that time, everything accelerated. Federica Tahan turned out to be a woman who looked like someone's favorite aunt and argued like a street fighter with a law degree. 53, reading glasses on a beaded chain, and a success rate in coercive control cases that bordered on legendary. She took Ilaria's case for a reduced fee after reading the petition and the marriage clause. This is textbook, Federica said. If textbooks had a chapter on feudal arrangements disguised as modern finance, your grandmother would have written that chapter. You read her notes? I did. And I want to reference her framework in our argument. Her analysis of debt as leverage is more sophisticated than half the academic literature on the subject. She never got credit for any of it. She's about to. Posthumously, unfortunately, but loudly. The Castellanos responded the way powerful families always respond when they feel the ground shifting. Not through the courts, through everything else. Ilaria's father received a visit from 2 men who made it clear the restaurant's liquor license was under review. Her mother's phone started ringing at odd hours, silence on the line. Noor's apartment was broken into. Nothing stolen, just drawers opened and left that way. A message. They want you to know they can reach the people you love, Dante said. Make the cost of fighting higher than the cost of surrendering. It's working, Ilaria admitted. My mother called me crying. My father won't answer his phone. Noor is sleeping at her sister's house. So what do you want to do? She thought about her grandmother's papers, about her mother's note, about the locked door and the sound of the lock clicking from the outside. I want to make it public. She called David Calloway, an investigative journalist at the Rivara Independent who'd spent a decade covering organized financial crime. Careful, fair, and unbuyable. They met at the Cullen Library. Calloway was younger than she expected, maybe 30, with tired eyes and a notebook that looked like it had survived several wars. She walked him through everything. 2 hours. The debt. The arrangement. The locked door. The escape. The petition. The marriage clause. Why go public? He asked. You have a legal case. Going public makes you a target. I'm already a target. Going quiet hasn't made me safer. It's just made me easier to ignore. What do you want people to know? That this happens every day. Families get trapped in debt, and the price of relief is their daughter's freedom. It's financial trafficking dressed up in a wedding gown. Nobody talks about it because the families are too ashamed, and the people doing it are too powerful. When can we run it? After the court hearing. I want the legal process to speak first. The hearing took place on a Tuesday in October. Courtroom 7 again, but this time the gallery had 30 people. Law students, journalists, Calloway among them, women's advocacy representatives, and in the second row, someone Ilaria didn't expect. Her mother, Rosaria Mancini, sat with her hands folded, wearing the good dress she saved for church. She didn't look at the Castellano side of the room. She looked at Ilaria, and in her eyes was something Ilaria had never seen from her mother before. Not guilt, not fear, resolve. Federica was masterful, methodical and human at the same time, walking the judge through the financial arrangement, the conditional clause, the locked bridal suite. She referenced Nonna Caterina's framework, gave her name and her work formal legal recognition for the first time in history. When Selene responded, she addressed the court with visible discomfort. Your Honor, I wish to note for the record that I was not made aware of the conditional marriage clause until the preliminary hearing. I am recusing myself from any defense related to the marriage arrangement. The gallery murmured, a lawyer publicly distancing herself from her own clients in open court. Renato Castellano, seated behind Solene, went rigid. Gio wasn't there. Nobody explained his absence. Federica called Ilaria to the stand. She spoke clearly, without dramatic pauses or performed emotion. Just facts. Then Federica asked the question that changed everything. On the day of the wedding, what happened when you tried to leave the bridal suite? The door was locked from the outside. And what did you hear through the door? I heard Renato Castellano tell his son that I wasn't going anywhere, that the wedding would clear my father's debt, that I wasn't stupid, just sentimental. He said it the way you'd describe a flaw in a product, something inconvenient but manageable. The courtroom was absolutely still. In the gallery, her mother was crying silently, her posture unbroken. What did you do then? I climbed out a window, barefoot, in the wedding dress. And I ran until I couldn't hear the church bells anymore. Judge Morvain looked at the documents, at Renato, at Solene, who had distanced herself from the very defense she was supposed to mount. This court finds sufficient evidence to classify the arrangement as coercive and exploitative. The conditional marriage clause renders the entire debt agreement voidable. The debt is hereby declared unenforceable. Mr. Castellano's claims against the Mancini family are dismissed with prejudice. She paused. I am also referring the matter to the provincial prosecutor's office for investigation of potential criminal charges. The gavel came down. The gallery erupted. Professor Cassain was on her feet. The law students were looking at each other with the expression of people who'd just watched theory become practice. Calloway was writing furiously. Ilaria stood at the petitioner's table, her grandmother's folder in front of her. She looked across the courtroom at Renato Castellano. He was already leaving through the side exit. He didn't look at her. That was fine. She didn't need his acknowledgement. She never had. Her mother was waiting in the hallway. Rosaria pulled Ilaria into a hug so tight it hurt and whispered something she would carry for the rest of her life. Your grandmother is proud. And so am I. And I'm sorry I wasn't braver. You're here now, Mama. That's brave enough. Calloway's article ran the next morning. Front page. Bride who fled. Castellano. Wedding exposes financial coercion in landmark court ruling. Every claim sourced. Every fact verified. He'd included Nonna Caterina's story, the grandmother who'd built legal frameworks from a kitchen table for 3 decades without recognition. He'd interviewed Professor Cassain, who called Ilaria one of the most gifted legal minds she'd ever taught. He'd interviewed Federica, who said the case could reshape how courts handled debt-based coercion. By noon, national outlets. By evening, international. The narrative was irresistible. A woman who'd climbed out of a window in a wedding dress and then dismantled the legal architecture of her own oppression from a borrowed kitchen table. Ilaria turned off her phone, turned on the prepaid one instead. Only 4 people had the number. Noor called first. You're everywhere. My mother is watching your story on 3 different screens simultaneously. How's your apartment? Fixed. New locks. The police actually came this time. Funny how that works once the Castellanos are in the news for the wrong reasons. Dante was next. Understated as always. People are calling my office asking for comment. Apparently, someone figured out you've been staying above my bookshop. Is that a problem? Only if you mind being linked to a man with a complicated reputation. Your reputation is the least complicated thing in my life right now. Professor Cassain left a voicemail. The university wants to offer you a full scholarship. They're also asking if you'd speak to the law faculty. Your grandmother's framework deserves to be taught. Interview requests piled up. Television, podcasts, women's organizations across 3 countries. A legal aid nonprofit offered her a position. A member of parliament cited her case in a speech about financial reform. Ilaria sat in the apartment above the bookshop, surrounded by all this noise, and felt the weight of what she'd done settle onto her shoulders. She'd wanted justice. She'd gotten a spotlight. These aren't the same thing, she told Dante that evening on the small balcony, watching Kalen settle into darkness below. Justice is the court ruling. The spotlight is something else, something I didn't ask for. But it's here. What do you do with it? Part of me wants to disappear again. Just finish my degree in peace. You could. Nobody would blame you. But then the story stops with me. The system doesn't change. The next girl whose father takes a bad loan faces the same thing I did. Maybe the spotlight isn't for me. Maybe it's for her. For the one who comes after. She called Federica. I want to help other women. Not just through the courts, through prevention, education, making sure families understand what these arrangements actually are before they sign anything. Federica was quiet for a moment. Then she said something that landed like a key, turning in a lock. Your grandmother built the framework. You proved it works. Now build the institution. It didn't happen overnight. Real things never do. Ilaria re-enrolled at the University of Serrano on a full scholarship. Night classes, weekend seminars, an accelerated track that Professor Cassane helped her negotiate so the remaining 2 semesters could be compressed into 3 intensive terms. Her thesis evolved from academic theory into something alive, a legal analysis of coercive financial arrangements grounded in real case law, starting with her grandmother's kitchen table advocacy and ending with her own courtroom victory. She graduated 11 months later, top of her class. Nonna Caterina's name was in the acknowledgments, and Professor Cassan cried during the defense. The first time I cried in a professional setting, she told Ilaria afterward, was when I realized one of my students had dropped out because she was being sold to pay her father's debt. The relief of seeing her finish is difficult to articulate. Federica offered Ilaria a position. Junior counsel, coercive control division. Modest pay, crushing caseload. Ilaria accepted without hesitation. Within months, they'd filed 4 cases modeled on Ilaria's precedent. 3 resulted in debt agreements being voided. The legal aid clinic was Ilaria's idea. A partnership between Federica's firm, the university, and a women's advocacy nonprofit. They set it up in Rivara's Eastern Quarter, 2 blocks from her family's restaurant. Free consultations for families facing predatory debt arrangements, financial literacy workshops, a hotline in 4 languages because exploitation didn't care what language you spoke. Her parents came to the opening. Her father stood in the doorway looking at the sign. I don't deserve to be proud of you, Tommaso said quietly. After what I allowed. Papa, you were trapped. We were all trapped. That's the whole point. You're here now. She took his hand. That counts. Her mother brought food. Of course she did. Rosaria filled the clinic's kitchen with enough pasta to feed the entire quarter, then stayed to serve it, talking to the women who came through the door like old friends. Dante was there too, standing in the background the way he was comfortable doing. He'd restructured his logistics company. New partners, expanded legitimate operations, cut ties with anyone whose practices didn't survive scrutiny. It cost him money. He did it anyway. You're becoming respectable, Ilaria told him one evening, walking along the Kaleni River. Don't tell anyone. It'll ruin my reputation. Their relationship had evolved the way real relationships do. Not in a single dramatic moment, but through accumulated honesty, through arguments about his protectiveness and her stubbornness, through the slow process of trusting someone who'd seen you at your most desperate and hadn't looked away. They'd kissed for the first time 3 months after the courthouse, late at night, in the middle of an argument about whether she was taking on too many cases. He'd said she was going to burn out. She'd said she didn't need him to manage her. Then they'd both gone quiet, and she'd kissed him because it was more honest than anything she could have said. You're sure? He'd asked. I climbed out a window in a wedding dress and got into a stranger's car. I'm capable of making decisions. That was a survival instinct. This is different. Yes, this is a choice. There's a difference. The Castellano aftermath unfolded slowly. Renato faced investigation, not just for Ilaria's case, but for a pattern stretching back decades. Other families came forward, other women, other debts used as leashes. Selene sent Ilaria a letter after the trial. Your grandmother's framework is the most elegant legal reasoning I've encountered in nearly 3 decades of practice. I'm incorporating it into a continuing education seminar. With your permission, I'd like to credit her by name. Ilaria granted permission, then sat alone in her office and cried, not from sadness, but from the overwhelming sensation of a circle completing itself. 30 years of invisible work, finally seen. 14 months after she'd climbed out of a window in a wedding dress, Ilaria stood in the legal aid clinic on a Saturday morning, watching the room fill with people. The clinic had expanded twice. 4 full-time lawyers now, plus law students from Professor Kassane's program. Over 200 cases handled. The provincial legislature had passed a reform bill, informally called the Mancini Amendment, addressing debt-contingent marriage arrangements. Not perfect. Legislation never was, but it was a wall where there had been an open door. Dante arrived carrying boxes of supplies because that was what he did now. Showed up, carried things, and fixed what was broken, asked what was needed. "Can I talk to you for a minute?" he asked. They stepped outside. The eastern quarter was noisy with Saturday traffic. Children running, vendors shouting, the ordinary chaos of a neighborhood that was alive. "I have something for you," Dante said. He reached into his jacket and pulled out a small box. "If this is what I think it is, you should know I have strong opinions about proposals." "I know. You have strong opinions about everything. It's one of many things I love about you." Inside was a ring. Simple, elegant. A single sapphire the color of the suit she'd bought with her own money for the courthouse hearing. Not a diamond. Not traditional. "This was my mother's," he said. "She wore it the day she told my father she was leaving his business to start her own. It was her independence ring, not her wedding ring. The wedding ring was someone else's promise. This one was a promise she made to herself. I'm not asking you to marry me. Not yet. I'm asking you to let me keep choosing you. Every day. On purpose. Because you're the woman who climbed out a window and then climbed into a courtroom and brought an empire down with a 46-page petition and her grandmother's notes. I've never met anyone braver or more stubborn or more worth standing beside." Ilaria took the ring from the box and put it on her own finger. Didn't wait for him to do it. That detail mattered. "Yes," she said, "to all of it. But I'm putting it on myself." He laughed, surprised, genuine. "Of course you are." Later that evening, after the clinic closed and the last client left, Ilaria sat alone at her desk. She opened her grandmother's leather folder. She found the last page Nonna Caterina had written, the final case note, dated 3 years before she died. The handwriting was shakier, the ink lighter, but the mind behind it was still sharp. The law is not justice. The law is a tool. Justice is what happens when someone picks up the tool and refuses to put it down, even when their hands are tired, even when the people in power tell them the tool isn't theirs to hold. It is always theirs to hold. Tell them that. Tell the girls who come after me. The tool belongs to anyone brave enough to use it. She closed the folder, tied the ribbon, placed it in the drawer of her desk at the clinic, where every lawyer who worked there would know its story. She texted Dante, "Coming home." His reply was immediate. "Door is open." She walked through the eastern quarter as the sun went down. Past her father's restaurant, still open, the debt erased. Past the courthouse where she'd watched the Castellano Empire flinch. Past the university where her thesis sat in the library, Nonna Caterina's name in the acknowledgments. She walked home to an apartment above a bookshop, to a man who'd offered her a car when she needed escape, and then offered her space when she needed to become herself. To a life she'd built from her grandmother's notes, and her mother's unfinished letter, and her own stubborn refusal to be traded. Ilaria Mancini had climbed out of a window on the worst day of her life. She'd landed hard and kept running. And then she'd stopped running and started building. Not a fairy tale, not a rescue story. Something better. A life she chose. Every single piece of it. She fell asleep that night with the sapphire ring on her finger and her grandmother's words in her chest. The tool belongs to anyone brave enough to use it. Tomorrow there would be new cases, new fights. The world was still unfair and broken and full of locked doors. But Ilaria knew something about locked doors now. She knew that windows existed. She knew the ground on the other side was hard and the landing would hurt, and the road ahead would be uncertain and frightening and entirely her own. And she knew that was enough, that it was everything.